My sister texted me a picture of the condo lobby before she texted me the address. Marble floors, gold lighting, a concierge desk with fresh orchids. Under the photo she wrote, "Try not to make this weird on Saturday. Mom says you're still sensitive about the college money, but this is a happy day for me." My name is Mara Whitcomb. I was 29 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and working as a closing coordinator for a real estate law office. My job was to catch bad paperwork before it ruined someone's life. Wrong names, missing signatures, fraudulent transfers, deeds that said one truth while families told another. I did not know then that the skill my parents mocked would become the one thing that stopped my sister at her own front door. My younger sister Tessa had always been the kind of person people rushed to protect from consequences. If she cried, my mother called it stress. If I cried, she called it attitude. If Tessa quit something, she was overwhelmed. If I struggled, I was ungrateful. Our family did not have rules. We had roles. Tessa was the delicate one with dreams. I was the responsible one with shoulders strong enough to carry whatever they decided not to face. When I was 17, I had a college acceptance letter taped above my desk, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I remember touching the corner of that envelope every morning like it was proof that I was almost out. My grandmother Ruth had helped build my college fund before she died, and I had added every dollar from summer jobs, weekend shifts, and birthday checks I never spent. That fund was not just money, it was a door. My parents closed that door at our kitchen table 2 weeks before graduation. My mother Elaine folded her hands like she was about to pray. My father Grant stood behind her with his jaw tight, refusing to sit down. I thought someone had died again. Then Mom said, "Honey, we had to make a family decision." I looked from her to my father, waiting for the disaster. She slid a bank statement toward me and said Tessa needed help. Tessa had been accepted into a private performing arts academy in New York. She had cried for 3 days because they required housing deposits, wardrobe fees, and tuition up front. My parents said it was her chance. My chance apparently could wait. When I asked how much of my college fund was gone, my father said, "Don't be selfish, Mara. Your sister has talent. You have common sense. You'll land on your feet." That sentence followed me for years. You'll land on your feet. People only say that when they have already pushed you. I watched Tessa leave for New York with matching luggage and a tearful airport send-off. I stayed in Charlotte, declined my admission, and enrolled in community college at night. By day I answered phones at an insurance office. By evening I learned contracts, not because I loved paperwork, but because paperwork had stolen my future while everyone called it sacrifice. Tessa lasted 9 months in New York. She came home because the instructors were toxic, the city was draining, and her roommate didn't understand boundaries. My parents welcomed her back with flowers and a freshly painted bedroom. No one apologized to me. No one rebuilt the fund. The money became a ghost in the house, always present, never named. If I brought it up, my mother's face hardened. "Family helps family," she would say, as if theft sounded prettier when wrapped in duty. Years passed and Tessa reinvented herself as a lifestyle consultant online. She posted videos about feminine energy, high standards, and refusing to settle. She filmed herself lighting candles beside rented furniture and talked about abundance like it had personally chosen her. My parents commented under every post, "So proud of you. You deserve the world." Watching them praise her for surviving on what they took from me taught me something sharp and permanent. I did not hate Tessa. Hate would have required more energy than I was willing to give her. What I felt was colder. I felt finished. I built my life carefully, receipt by receipt, class by class, promotion by promotion. I earned a paralegal certificate, then moved into real estate closings, where I discovered I had a gift for finding the one wrong sentence in 40 pages of polished lies. My boss called it discipline. I called it scar tissue. The invitation to Tessa's move-in party arrived on thick ivory cardstock, with her name embossed in rose gold. Tessa Whitcomb's New Beginning. Saturday, 2 p.m. The Meridian at South Park. I stared at it for a long time because I knew that building. Our office had handled several transactions there. Luxury condos, secured elevators, private balconies, units that cost more than my parents' house had been worth when I was a child. My mother called that night before I had even decided whether to go. "Mara," she said, too sweetly. "I hope you got the invitation. Tessa really wants her sister there." I waited. With my mother, the real sentence always came second. "And please don't bring up old grievances. Your father is very proud of what we've done for her. This is not the time for bitterness. What you've done for her, I repeated. That's one way to put it. Silence stretched between us. Then Mom sighed the same tired sigh she used when I was a teenager asking for things like fairness. We helped both of our daughters in different ways. Tessa needed financial support. You needed to become strong. I almost laughed. They had turned neglect into a character-building program and expected me to applaud the curriculum. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with the invitation in front of me. The old version of me would have cried. The younger Mara would have wondered what she did wrong. Why love in our house always came with a receipt I was expected to pay. But I was not 17 anymore. I worked with legal descriptions, chain of title recording stamps, and ownership records every day. So I did what my family had never expected me to do. I looked it up. The county property database was public. Most people did not know how much truth sat quietly in government records, waiting for someone patient enough to search. I typed in Tessa's name first. Nothing. I typed in my parents' names. Their old house appeared along with refinances and a paid-off line of credit. Nothing at the Meridian. Then I searched by building and unit number because Tessa had proudly included it on the invitation like a trophy. Unit 1807 appeared. I clicked the record and felt my pulse slow in a strange, dangerous way. The grantee name was not Tessa Whitcomb. It was not Elaine or Grant Whitcomb. It was mine. Mara Elise Whitcomb. My full legal name correct down to the middle initial. For a few seconds I thought my screen had glitched. Then I downloaded the deed and read it again line by line the way I had trained myself never to panic around paper. The transfer had been recorded 5 weeks earlier from Bellamy Family Holdings LLC. Bellamy was my grandmother Ruth's maiden name. I had not heard it spoken in my parents' house since her funeral. Below the legal description was a trustee's signature from Calvin Rhodes, the estate attorney who used to visit my grandmother with a leather briefcase and peppermints in his coat pocket. The deed referenced a beneficiary clause established before Ruth Bellamy Whitcomb's death. My hands did not shake until I saw the final line of the recording notes. Access and ownership authorization to be released to named grantee only. Named grantee, me, not Tessa, not my parents, me. Suddenly my mother's careful wording made sense. Proud of what we've done for her. Not bought, not owned, done. They had dressed up a lie and hoped the lighting would be good enough that nobody saw the seams. I printed the deed at work the next morning before anyone else came in. The copier hummed in the quiet office while the pages slid out warm and clean. I placed them in a blue folder and wrote nothing on the tab. Evidence did not need decoration. Then I called Calvin Rhodes' office from my desk phone. His assistant put me on hold for less than a minute before an older voice came on the line and said, "Mara, I wondered when you would find it." That was the first time in 12 years I heard an adult speak to me like the truth belonged in my hands. Mr. Rhodes did not tell me everything over the phone, but he told me enough. My grandmother had left certain assets protected for me, separate from my parents, because she had worried I would be outvoted in my own family. The condo had been purchased through a delayed provision after another property sale. My parents had been notified as interested relatives, not owners. "Can Tessa legally move in?" I asked. My voice sounded calm enough to belong to someone else. Mr. Rhodes paused, then said, "Not without your written authorization. And, as of this morning, the building has been instructed to verify access strictly through the recorded owner." I looked at the blue folder on my desk. For the first time in years, the old wound did not feel open. It felt documented. On Saturday, I drove to the Meridian wearing a simple black dress and the kind of low heels I could stand in for hours. The blue folder sat on the passenger seat. My phone buzzed twice on the way there. "Tessa, don't be late. Mom wants family pictures before everyone arrives." Then my father, "Today is about your sister. Be mature." I placed the phone face down and kept driving. The lobby was even brighter than Tessa's photo. White orchids, polished stone, a wall of glass reflecting people who had dressed to be seen. Tessa stood near the concierge desk in a champagne-colored jumpsuit, laughing too loudly while my parents arranged gift bags on a table. My mother spotted me and smiled with warning in her eyes. "There you are," she said. "Please remember, Mara, this is a celebration." Tessa turned, holding up a slim, black keycard between two manicured fingers. "You made it," she said. "Try not to look like someone died. My followers love authentic family moments, but not depressing ones." A few people nearby laughed because they thought sisters talked like that. My father looked at the floor. My mother adjusted Tessa's hair and whispered something that made them both smile. I touched the blue folder inside my tote and said nothing. When the elevator opened, Tessa led everyone in like she owned the building, the hallway, and every breath inside it. She talked about custom lighting Italian tile and how she had worked so hard to manifest a secure life. My mother squeezed her arm. My father stood behind them, pale and stiff. On the 18th floor, we stepped into a quiet corridor. Tessa walked to Unit 1807, lifted her keycard and pressed it against the lock. The reader flashed red. She laughed once, sharp and embarrassed, then tried again. Red. She pressed harder. Red. The hallway went silent. My mother's smile tightened. My father whispered, "Tessa, wait." But Tessa snapped. Obviously, the building made a mistake. Then, the concierge stepped out of the elevator behind us, tablet in hand, and looked past my sister directly at me. "Miss Whitcomb?" he asked. Tessa turned. "I'm Miss Whitcomb." He shook his head carefully. "I'm sorry. I mean Mara Whitcomb. According to the deed and access authorization, she is the only owner approved to activate this unit." For 1 second nobody breathed. The hallway held all of us in a silence so clean it felt staged. Tessa's hand was still raised near the lock, her black keycard useless between 2 fingers. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father looked at me like I had stepped out of a wall he had spent years pretending was solid. The concierge kept his tablet against his chest and waited with the careful patience of someone trained to handle rich people's disasters quietly. Tessa laughed first, not because anything was funny but because laughter was her favorite way to reject reality. "That's impossible," she said, turning to the guests with a little roll of her eyes. "Obviously there's a paperwork mix-up. Mara doesn't even live here." She said it as if ownership required matching furniture and a ring light. Then she looked at me, still smiling, but her voice sharpened. "Tell him. Tell him this is my unit." I looked at the lock, then at her face. "I can't tell him that." My mother stepped toward me fast enough that her bracelet clattered against her watch. "Mara," she whispered, but it was not a whisper of concern. It was a command wearing perfume. "Not here." Those 2 words explained my whole childhood. Not here meant not where anyone could see. Not now meant not when it inconvenienced them. Not like this meant not in a way that told the truth. The concierge cleared his throat. "For security reasons, only the recorded owner can authorize access changes. I'm happy to call management, but the documents on file list Mara Elise Whitcomb as the sole owner." The word sole moved through the hallway like a match dropped onto dry paper. Tessa lowered the keycard slowly. A man I recognized from one of her videos stopped filming with his phone. My father finally looked at me directly, and for the first time that day, there was fear in his eyes. "What did you do?" Tessa asked me. "Did you call someone? Did you sabotage my key?" Her cheeks flushed under her makeup. She had dressed for applause, not questions. "I didn't sabotage anything," I said. "The building is following the deed." My mother grabbed my elbow fingers, digging hard enough to hurt. "We need to talk privately." I looked down at her hand until she released me. It was a small thing. It felt enormous. Management moved us into a private conference room off the lobby, while the guests hovered near the elevators, pretending not to listen. Tessa sat at the head of the table, even there, as if furniture could vote for her. My parents sat on either side of her. I remained standing near the glass wall, the blue folder tucked under my arm. The building manager, a woman named Patrice, entered with the same tablet the concierge had carried, and asked if I wanted the room cleared. "No," my mother said quickly. "We're family. This is a misunderstanding." I turned to Patrice and said, "They can stay." Tessa crossed her arms. "Thank you for allowing us to stay in my condo conversation." My father rubbed both hands over his face. He looked older than I remembered, but not sorry. That distinction mattered. Age can soften a person's edges without changing their choices. He had the exhausted expression of a man angry that the lie required maintenance. Patrice opened the file on her tablet. Unit 1807 was transferred through Bellamy Family Holdings to Mara Elise Whitcomb. We received instructions from the trustee that no secondary access, move-in, approval elevator, reservation, or resident credential should be activated without Miss Whitcomb's written consent. Tessa stared at her like she had spoken another language. "But my parents handled the move-in," she said. "The furniture is being delivered today." "That delivery has been paused," Patrice replied. "Without owner authorization, we cannot allow possession." Tessa turned to my parents. "Do something." That was Tessa's entire survival strategy in 2 words. Do something. She did not ask what happened. She did not ask why my name was on the deed. She asked the people who had always bent reality around her discomfort to bend it again right there under recessed lighting. My father reached inside his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Mara, he said, placing it on the table. This is simple. Sign this access authorization and we'll sort out the deed issue later. He slid it toward me with 2 fingers. I did not touch it at first. I just looked at him. The same man who had told me I would land on my feet was now trying to hand me another fall and call it paperwork. What is it? I asked. His jaw tightened. Temporary authorization. I opened the blue folder, took out my copy of the deed, and placed it beside his paper. Then I finally read what he had brought. It was not temporary. It was a limited power of attorney, drafted badly, giving my father authority to manage lease transfer and encumber the property on my behalf. There was even a notary block at the bottom, blank, but waiting. I looked up slowly. You brought this to a move-in party, my mother's face reddened. Because you're unpredictable when you're emotional. Tessa scoffed. Oh my God, Mara, just sign it. You didn't even know this place existed until now. I already picked furniture. That was when something inside me shifted from hurt to clarity. They had not invited me to celebrate. They had invited me to perform a transfer under pressure, surrounded by witnesses they thought would shame me into obedience. Patrice stepped back slightly, professional enough not to react human enough that her eyes changed. I slid the document back to my father. No. The word landed plainly without drama. My mother leaned forward. Do you understand what you're doing? Your sister has announced this. People came, deliveries are scheduled. Your father and I have put deposits down. On a property you don't own, I said. You should ask for refunds. Tessa's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. You are so jealous, it's embarrassing. Her voice broke on the last word, but not from grief. From humiliation. You could never stand that I got attention. You've been waiting for a chance to ruin something for me. I almost answered. I almost listed every summer shift, every canceled plan, every silent dinner after my college acceptance became family debt. But I had learned that pain offered to selfish people becomes entertainment. So, I said, this condo is in my name. Tessa pointed at me. Because Grandma felt sorry for you. My mother flinched. My father whispered Tessa. But she kept going, too angry to notice the way truth was leaking through her sentence. That's all this is. Everyone always has to baby Mara because she acts like the world owes her for not going to some stupid school. The room went still again, but differently this time. My mother recovered first. Enough, she said. Then she looked at me with wet eyes she had produced on command my entire life. Your grandmother wanted harmony. She would hate seeing you use her gift to punish your sister. That almost worked. Not because it was true, but because my grandmother's name still lived in the softest place in me. Ruth Bellamy Whitcomb had been the only adult who asked what I wanted and waited long enough to hear the answer. She wanted me protected, I said. My mother's tears vanished so quickly, it was like watching a lamp switch off. Protected from what? Your own family, she sounded offended by the accuracy. My father leaned forward, lowering his voice. Mara, we made mistakes. But Tessa needs stability. You have a job. You have an apartment. You're fine. There it was again, the family math. Tessa's wants counted as emergencies. My survival counted as proof. I needed nothing. I was fine at 17 too, right? I asked. My father looked away. Tessa threw up her hands. We are not doing the college thing again. No, I said. You never did the college thing at all. You spent the money and called my silence maturity. My mother's voice hardened. That money was ours to manage. Some of it was Grandma Ruth's. She gave it to the family. She wrote my name on the envelopes. For the first time, my father looked truly angry. Not ashamed. Angry. You have no idea what it was like raising you two, he said. Every decision felt impossible. I believed that. I believed parenting was hard. I believed money pressure could break people in private ways. But hardship did not explain why they only sacrificed my future. It did not explain why Tessa got flights, housing classes, clothes, and forgiveness, while I got a lecture about resilience. Patrice gently interrupted. Miss Whitcomb, would you like us to deny all deliveries for Unit 1807 today? Everyone looked at me. My mother's eyes widened. My father's expression turned dangerous. Tessa looked stunned, as if she had forgotten I could answer a question without family approval. I thought of the moving truck downstairs, the staged balloons, the champagne, the gold letters on her invitation. Then I thought of my acceptance letter over my childhood desk. Yes, I said. Deny them. Tessa made a sound like I had slapped her. My mother stood so quickly her chair tipped back against the wall. Mara Elise Whitcomb, you will not humiliate this family. The full name did not scare me anymore. It sounded almost ceremonial, like she was naming the person who had outgrown her reach. I'm not humiliating the family, I said. I'm refusing to keep funding the illusion. The party dissolved in pieces. Guests were told there had been an administrative delay. The champagne was taken back to someone's car. Tessa's followers whispered near the revolving doors. A delivery driver asked who was paying the waiting fee. My father argued with him in the loading zone while my mother stood rigid beside a tower of gift bags. Tessa sat on a lobby bench, furiously typing on her phone, her useless keycard lying beside her like a dead insect. I should have felt victorious. I did not. Victory would have been 18-year-old me walking onto the campus I earned. Victory would have been my parents choosing honesty before being cornered by a lock. What I felt was exhaustion, with a thin thread of relief running through it. The condo was mine, but the day had made something painfully clear. They had not misunderstood me for years. They had understood exactly where I hurt, and kept pressing there anyway. Before I left, Patrice asked if I wanted the locks reissued under my control. I signed the building's owner authorization form with a steady hand. No secondary access, no move-in approval, no deliveries without written permission. As I handed the pen back, I saw my father watching me from across the lobby. He looked like he wanted to say something. For one foolish second I hoped it might be an apology. Instead, he walked over and said, "You've made your point." I looked at him waiting. His voice lowered. "Now, fix it." Those 3 words were almost worse than everything before them. They were not shocked by what they had done. They were shocked I had interrupted the benefit of it. I put the blue folder back in my tote. "No," I said again. "I think I just did." That evening, Tessa posted a crying video from my parents' living room. She did not say my name at first. She called me someone close to me. She said a jealous relative had exploited a legal technicality to take away the home her parents had worked hard to give her. My mother sat beside her on the couch, holding her hand. My father stayed off camera, but I heard his voice once in the background saying, "Keep it short." By midnight, strangers had found my social media. Messages came in waves. "How could you do that to your sister, greedy? Bitter. You probably never wanted her to succeed." A few people from high school sent curious texts disguised as concern. My Aunt Linda wrote, "Your grandmother would be ashamed of this ugliness." I stared at that one for a long time, then set the phone face down. People love a villain when someone else writes the caption. The next morning I woke to 17 missed calls. 6 from my mother, 4 from Tessa, 3 from my father. The rest were relatives who had ignored my graduation but suddenly cared deeply about property ethics. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and saved screenshots of Tessa's video comments, captions, and timestamps into a folder labeled 1807. Real estate had taught me that people lie loosely until they realize records keep their own memory. At 903 Calvin Rhodes called. His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. "Mara, I saw the video." I closed my eyes. "I didn't send it to you." "No," he said. "A cousin of yours did, with several opinions attached." I almost apologized, then stopped myself. He continued, "I think it's time you came to my office. There are documents your grandmother left that I hoped your parents would never force me to use." I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter. "What documents?" Calvin was quiet for a moment. "The original education account, records for one. Letters from Ruth. Notes about why she changed the beneficiary structure after your college fund was drained. And a signed statement from your parents acknowledging they were informed the Bellamy assets were intended only for you." My apartment seemed to tilt slightly around me. I thought the deed was the reversal. I thought the red keycard reader had been the moment the past finally pushed back. But as Calvin spoke, I understood that the condo was only the door. Behind it was a paper trail my parents had spent 12 years believing would never see daylight. And now, because Tessa had decided to cry online, every lie they had buried was about to become part of the record. Calvin Rhodes' office was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building near the courthouse, the kind of place with heavy doors and quiet carpet that made people lower their voices without being told. I arrived at 10 with the blue folder in my tote. and Tessa's video saved on my phone. Mr. Rhodes met me himself in the lobby. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair almost white, but his eyes were still steady. He led me into a conference room where 3 boxes sat on the table. Not one file. Not one envelope. 3 banker's boxes labeled in my grandmother's handwriting. Natalie would have felt like a ghost, but Mara was written there, firm and unmistakable across every lid. My throat tightened so suddenly I had to look away. Calvin noticed and gave me a moment without filling it. That small courtesy almost broke me. "Your grandmother was careful," he said when I sat down. "More careful than your parents realized." He opened the first box and removed a folder tied with cotton string. Inside were copies of checks, bank statements, letters, and handwritten notes. My childhood appeared in documents: birthday deposits, summer job savings, my grandmother's contributions. Then, across several pages, withdrawals made in large amounts during the spring before my high school graduation. I knew the numbers would hurt. I did not expect the dates to hurt more. One withdrawal had been made the same week I bought a used blue dress for senior awards night. I remembered my mother telling me not to spend too much because college is expensive. Another came 2 days after Grandma Ruth's funeral, when I had still been sleeping with the quilt she made me tucked under my chin. Grief had not even cooled before they started moving money. Calvin placed another document in front of me. "This is the acknowledgement." My parents' signatures were at the bottom, dated 4 months after the withdrawals. The wording was plain enough that no one could hide behind confusion. Elaine and Grant Whitcomb acknowledged that funds originally designated for Mara Elise Whitcomb's education had been redirected for Tessa Whitcomb's benefit against Ruth Bellamy Whitcomb's stated wishes. They also acknowledged that future Bellamy-held assets intended for Mara were not to be transferred, pledged, leased, or assigned without Mara's written consent. I read it twice, then a third time. "They signed this." My voice sounded distant. Calvin nodded. "Your grandmother's estate had some unresolved holdings. Your parents wanted influence over them. Ruth's instructions limited that. I required this acknowledgement before allowing any family communication about those assets to proceed." He paused. "They were angry. But they signed." I stared at my father's signature, bold and impatient, and my mother's neat cursive below it. For 12 years they had not only known, they had signed proof that they knew. Every lecture about sacrifice, every family dinner where they told me to move on, every time my mother called me bitter for remembering they had been sitting on their own written confession. I did not cry. That surprised me. The sadness was too old to come out as tears. It settled into my bones like cold iron. Calvin opened the second box. "Your grandmother also wrote you a letter. She instructed me to give it to you when the final asset transferred, or earlier, if your parents attempted to interfere." He slid a cream envelope across the table. My name was on it in the handwriting I had loved as a child. For a moment I was 8 years old again at her kitchen counter, watching her label jars of peach preserves with that same patient hand. I opened it carefully. The letter was not dramatic. Grandma Ruth had never been a dramatic woman. She wrote that love without fairness becomes control. She wrote that she worried I would be praised for being strong while being denied protection. She wrote that she could not undo what my parents had taken, but she could make sure they did not get to take twice. The last line blurred, even though I tried to keep my eyes steady. "A door with your name on it should open for you first." I pressed the letter flat against the table. Calvin looked toward the window, giving me privacy without leaving. When I could speak, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He did not flinch. "Because Ruth did not want you pulled into a legal fight at 18. She hoped the delayed structure would mature when you were independent enough to decide without pressure." He folded his hands. "She knew your family better than I wanted to believe." My phone buzzed on the table. My mother. I let it ring. Then Tessa. Then my father. Calvin watched the screen light up over and over. "They will try to settle this emotionally before they realize it is legal," he said. I almost smiled at how precisely he had named them. "They already started online." I showed him Tessa's video. He watched without changing expression, but when my mother appeared in frame, his jaw tightened. "This is useful," he said. "Unwise of them, but useful." He asked me to forward the video screenshots and messages to his office. Then he explained the next steps in a calm voice that turned panic into tasks. We would send a formal notice to my parents and Tessa. We would warn them not to represent the property as theirs, not to harass building staff, not to attempt possession, and not to defame me publicly. It sounded clean on paper. Families never are. By noon, the notice had gone out. By 1, my mother had left a voicemail saying I was destroying Tessa's mental health. By 2, my father had texted lawyers. Really. After everything we did for you, I stared at that line until the words stopped making sense. Everything we did for you. They had fed me, housed me, and used that as lifelong leverage. Some parents confuse basic care with ownership. Tessa posted again that evening. This time she named me. She said I had weaponized a technicality to steal her first real home. She said I had always resented her. She said our parents were heartbroken. She cried prettily with her face angled toward the lamp. Comments poured in. A few strangers began calling my office. One left a voicemail saying our firm employed property thieves. That was when the issue stopped being family drama and became professional harm. My boss, Andrea Pike, called me into her office the next morning. Andrea was a sharp woman in her 50s who wore reading glasses on a chain and had no patience for messy facts. I brought the blue folder, the deed, and Calvin's notice. She read everything without interrupting. When she finished, she took off her glasses and said, "You understand title, so you understand this is not a technicality." I nodded. She leaned back. "Then stop letting them use that word." That sentence stayed with me. A technicality is what people call the rule that catches them. The deed was not a trick. My grandmother's letter was not a loophole. My name was not a clerical inconvenience in Tessa's aesthetic plan. It was ownership, yes, but more than that, it was a boundary written in public record. My family had spent years treating my boundaries like suggestions. Now, one of them had a recording stamp. At lunch, I called the Meridian. Patrice answered personally. She told me Tessa had come back with my parents that morning and tried to convince a different concierge that I had verbally approved access. When asked for written authorization, Tessa cried in the lobby and said the building was participating in abuse. My mother demanded management show compassion. My father asked whether a maintenance key could be used while the paperwork was corrected. "Was anything accessed?" I asked. "No," Patrice said. "We followed your instructions." I thanked her, then added Tessa and my parents by name to a written no-access directive. Sending that email made my hands tremble, not because I was uncertain but because it is strangely hard to protect yourself from people who trained you to feel cruel for doing it. I read the email 3 times before hitting send, then I hit send anyway. That night my Aunt Linda called. I almost ignored it, but something in me wanted one witness from the family to hear my voice before choosing their side. She began with a sigh. "Mara, honey, this has gone too far." I sat at my kitchen table, Grandma Ruth's letter beside my laptop. "What have they told you?" I asked. Linda hesitated. "That your grandmother left some property in your name by mistake, and you're refusing to let Tessa live there." "By mistake," I repeated. "Did they mention the college fund?" Silence. Then Linda said softer, "Your mother said that was old history." I looked at the boxes Calvin had copied for me, now stacked near my wall. Old history has receipts if someone kept them. "Aunt Linda," I said, "Grandma knew they used my fund. She changed the estate plan because of it." Mom and Dad signed an acknowledgement. Linda did not speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice had lost its practiced disapproval. "Elaine told us you decided not to go to Chapel Hill because you were scared to leave home." I closed my eyes. There it was. Not just theft. Replacement. They had not only taken the money, they had rewritten the reason I lost the life I wanted. My mother had turned my wound into my weakness, and served it to relatives until they swallowed it as truth. "I was not scared," I said. My voice did not shake, and that felt like a small victory. I had no money left. Aunt Linda whispered something I could not make out. Then she asked, "Can you send me proof?" It was such a family question. Proof. Not because I was trusted, but because my pain needed documentation before it could become inconvenient for others. Still, I sent it. Not everything. Enough. The next morning, Tessa's tone changed. She stopped crying and started threatening. She texted me directly for the first time since the party. "You are going to regret humiliating me." Then I know people. Then Mom says Grandma was confused at the end anyway. That one made my vision narrow. Grandma Ruth had balanced her own checkbook until 2 weeks before she died. She remembered birthdays, recipes, and which neighbor borrowed her hedge trimmer in 1998. I screenshotted every message and sent them to Calvin. He replied within minutes. "Do not engage. Preserve all communications. A cease and desist letter will be updated." I placed my phone on the table and walked around my apartment until the tightness in my chest loosened. Not engaging felt unnatural. I had spent my childhood defending myself in rooms where the verdict had been decided before I entered. Silence used to mean defeat. This silence felt strategic. By Friday, the story Tessa had posted began to crack. Aunt Linda stopped commenting heart emojis and deleted her earlier post about sibling cruelty. One of Tessa's followers, who apparently worked in mortgage processing, asked publicly how a deed could be a technicality. Someone else asked why Tessa's name was not on any record if the condo was truly hers. Tessa responded with vague phrases about privacy, family betrayal, and legal abuse. The internet smelled blood in the ambiguity. My mother called again that afternoon. This time I answered. "Mara," she said, and there was no sweetness left. "You need to come to the house tonight. We're having a family meeting." I almost laughed at the word need. "No." Her breath caught. "Excuse me, I'm not coming to be cornered." She lowered her voice. "Then we'll come to you. If you come to my apartment uninvited, I won't open the door." "You have become cruel," she said. There it was again, the family's favorite translation for disobedience. I looked at Grandma Ruth's letter on my table. "No," I said, "I've become accurate." My mother made a small, disgusted sound. "Your sister is humiliated. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Relatives are asking questions. We can end this if you sign the authorization and release a statement saying there was confusion." "What statement?" I asked, though I already knew. She was ready. She had probably written it in her head before dialing. "Say you and Tessa had a misunderstanding. Say you support her living there. Say the college fund issue has been twisted online, and our family has handled it privately." Her voice softened. "You don't have to give her the condo, Mara. Just let her live there until we figure things out." Until we figure things out. Another soft phrase with teeth. I imagined Tessa inside Unit 1807 filming balcony, sunsets, accepting gifts, establishing sympathy, turning my grandmother's protection into another family obligation. I would be shamed for interrupting. Possession changes people's courage. Once she was inside, every request to leave would become cruelty. Every boundary would become eviction. My parents knew that. They were not asking for peace, they were asking for a foothold. "Tellers, no," I said. My mother's voice sharpened. "Then your father is going to tell everyone what you were really like growing up." That stopped me, not because I feared some terrible secret, but because the threat was so childish and so familiar. They had run out of moral arguments and reached for character assassination. "He can tell everyone whatever story helps him sleep," I said. "But if any of you keep lying about me publicly, Calvin will respond with documents." She went silent at Calvin's name. "You went to him, yes. After all these years you ran to a lawyer instead of your mother." I closed my eyes briefly. There was a time when that sentence would have torn through me. Now I heard only the absurdity. "You were never the safe place for this conversation," I said. "You were the reason it needed a lawyer." The line went dead. 2 hours later, Calvin forwarded me an email from my father. It was written in the stiff tone of a man trying to sound reasonable for an audience. Grant claimed the family had always intended the condo to benefit both daughters, that I was reacting emotionally, and that Tessa had relied on parental assurances before making public announcements. He requested mediation. At the bottom, my father added one sentence that made my stomach turn. "Mara has a history of resentment toward her sister and may not be acting rationally." Calvin's response was brief. He proposed a meeting at his office the following Tuesday with all parties present, including building management, by phone if needed. He also attached the deed, the acknowledgement, the cease and desist notice, and a list of defamatory statements Tessa had made online. "This meeting," he told me when he called, "will not be about whether the property is yours. That is settled. It will be about whether they want the documents released quietly or in response to continued public claims." Tuesday came slowly. I spent the weekend organizing evidence. Screenshots by date. Voicemails transcribed. Texts saved. The deed. Grandma Ruth's letter. The acknowledgement. The college account withdrawals. I did not do it because I wanted to destroy them. I did it because confusion had always been their weapon. They made stories blurry, then blamed me for not seeing clearly. This time I wanted every line sharpened. On Monday night, Tessa posted one more video. She was not crying. She was standing outside the Meridian, the glass tower rising behind her, saying she would fight for what love built. She called the condo her dream home. She said certain people in families cannot stand seeing others shine. Then she held up the black keycard and said, "This little card may not work today, but truth always opens the right doors." I watched it once, then I saved it with the rest. The next morning, I walked into Calvin Rhodes' office, carrying the blue folder Grandma Ruth's letter, and a calm I had not earned easily. My parents were already there. Tessa sat between them, dressed in white, like innocence had a dress code. She looked at me and smiled, slow and mean. "Last chance to fix this before everyone sees who you really are," she said. I sat across from her, placed the blue folder on the table and said, "That's exactly why I came." Calvin did not begin with accusations. He began with copies. He placed the deed in the center of the table, then the building access directive, then the recorded transfer from Bellamy Family Holdings. My parents stared at the papers as if they had never seen documents become solid before. Tessa leaned back in her chair with her arms crossed, still wearing that small, cruel smile. She thought this meeting was about pressure. She did not understand it was about sequence. "Before anyone speaks emotionally," Calvin said, "we are going to establish facts." My mother's lips tightened. My father adjusted his cuff like he was preparing for a boardroom instead of a reckoning. Calvin tapped the deed once. "Unit 1807 belongs to Mara Elise Whitcomb, solely. There is no shared ownership, no pending correction, no implied transfer, and no authorization for Tessa Whitcomb to occupy the unit." Tessa rolled her eyes. "We know what the paper says. The issue is what Grandma intended." Calvin looked at her for a long moment, not unkindly. "That is exactly the issue." He opened the second folder and slid out my grandmother's letter of instruction, not the personal letter she wrote to me but the legal one. My mother's face changed before anyone read a word. That was how I knew she remembered it. Calvin read only the relevant lines. Ruth Bellamy Whitcomb had written that no Bellamy-held asset intended for Mara should be controlled by Elaine Grant or any sibling claiming family necessity. She named the education account. She named my parents' decision to redirect the money. She wrote that future assets were to compensate and protect me, not become another resource for family redistribution. The phrase sounded formal. It still cut like truth. My father sat forward. "Ruth was upset when she wrote that. She didn't understand the pressures we were under." Calvin opened another folder. "Then let's discuss what she understood." He placed the signed acknowledgement on the table. My parents' signatures faced upward like two fingerprints left at a scene. Tessa reached for it, but Calvin gently moved it closer to me. "This document confirms that both of you were informed in writing why Ruth changed the beneficiary structure." The room went very quiet. Tessa looked from my mother to my father. "What is that?" Neither answered. That was the first crack I saw in her confidence. Not remorse, not yet. Just the shock of discovering that her parents had kept a secret from her too. My mother whispered, "We signed a lot of things after Ruth died." Calvin nodded. "This one is only 2 pages. It is difficult to mistake." I watched my mother's hands. They were folded tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale. Those hands had once smoothed my graduation gown while telling me not to look disappointed in pictures. Those hands had packed Tessa's luggage with new dance shoes purchased from my future. Those hands had held my sister on camera while she called me jealous. Now they sat still because paper had finally removed the performance. Tessa stood abruptly. "So what? They made a decision years ago. Families make sacrifices. Mara didn't die. She has a job. Why does she get a luxury condo? Because she's still mad about college." I looked at her then. Really looked. She was not confused. She understood enough. She simply believed my loss had expired because her need was current. That belief had been fed to her for so long it felt like personality. "I don't get it because I'm mad," I said. "I get it because Grandma made sure the second thing they tried to take from me would not leave quietly." Tessa's face hardened. "You love acting wounded." My mother reached for her arm. "Tessa." But Tessa shook her off. "No, I'm tired of everyone acting like Mara is some saint. She always made me feel guilty for needing help." That sentence almost made me laugh, but there was nothing funny in it. "You didn't feel guilty," I said. "You felt witnessed." My father slammed his palm lightly on the table, not loud enough to be called violent, just loud enough to remind everyone he wanted control. "Enough. We are not here to relitigate childhood." Calvin looked at him. "No, Mr. Whitcomb. We are here because you attempted to secure access to property you knew was not yours." Then he placed my father's so-called temporary authorization on the table, the limited power of attorney, the blank notary block. My father's face drained of color. Calvin's voice remained even. "You brought this document to a party and attempted to have Mara sign it under social pressure. It would have allowed you to manage, lease, encumber, or transfer the property. That is not a misunderstanding, my mother whispered. We were going to explain. I turned to her. When she swallowed. After things calmed down. After Tessa moved in, she looked away. That was the answer. Calvin added the screenshots next. Tessa's videos. Captions. Comments she liked calling me greedy, unstable, abusive, and jealous. Then came the voicemail transcripts, my father's email questioning my rationality, and my mother's request that I release a false statement. Tessa's smile was gone. You saved all that, yes, I said. She looked disgusted as if records were more shameful than lies. That's creepy. Calvin closed the folder. It is preservation of evidence. And if the public claims continue, Mara has grounds to respond publicly with documents, pursue defamation remedies, and notify relevant platforms that your statements were false and harmful to her employment. He paused. I would advise against forcing that. For the first time, Tessa looked afraid. Not of hurting me, of being exposed. So what do you want? She snapped. Money. An apology video. You want me to humiliate myself so you can finally feel important. I felt the old reflex rise in me, the need to convince her I was not cruel, not jealous, not small. Then I looked at the deed. My name did not beg. It simply existed. I want the posts removed, I said. I want a written correction stating you had no ownership or authorization for Unit 1807. I want you, Mom and Dad, to stop contacting the Meridian. I want no access attempts, no deliveries, no public claims about the condo, and no more statements about my mental state or motives. My mother stared at me. And what about us? What about you? She flinched like I had raised my voice, though I had not. Are you really going to cut off your parents over property? The question was so perfectly dishonest, I felt almost calm hearing it. No, I said. I'm cutting off my parents because property finally proved the pattern. My father's expression hardened. You'll regret speaking to your mother that way. I looked at him. I regret learning to speak quietly so you could feel respected. No one spoke for several seconds. Calvin slid a settlement acknowledgement across the table. It was not dramatic. It did not ask them to confess on their knees. It required them to remove false posts, correct the public claim, stop access attempts, and communicate through Calvin's office regarding the condo. My parents read in silence. Tessa pushed it away at first. Then Calvin mentioned the platform reports and the employment-related calls to my office. She signed first. Her signature was sharp and angry. My father signed next, pressing so hard the pen almost tore the paper. My mother signed last. When she finished, she looked at me with wet eyes again, but I had learned the difference between tears and grief. I hope you enjoy being alone, she said. It was meant to be the old curse, the family exile, the warning that outside their approval I would have nothing. I put Grandma Ruth's personal letter back into my bag. I've been alone in this family for years, I said. The difference is, now I'm not confused about it. Calvin collected the signed pages. Tessa stood so quickly her chair hit the wall. Keep the condo, she said. It'll never make you happy. Then she walked out, white dress flashing past the frosted glass like a ghost, refusing to learn it was dead. My parents lingered. My father wanted the last word. He always had. Your grandmother filled your head with poison, he said. I shook my head. No. She left me an antidote. My mother made a wounded sound, but I did not step toward her. That was new. I had spent my life moving toward their pain, even when they caused mine. This time I let it stay where it belonged. Tessa removed the videos that afternoon. By evening she posted a stiff correction saying there had been confusion about ownership and that she would be taking time offline. It was not an apology, it was a retreat dressed as wellness. Aunt Linda called me crying, but I did not pick up. My mother sent one message: you have broken this family. I stared at it, then blocked her number. My father's number went next, Tessa's went last. The aftermath was not cinematic. No one clapped. No one handed me justice wrapped in ribbon. I still had to go to work the next morning. I still had dishes in the sink and rent due on my apartment. But something invisible had shifted. My office stopped receiving calls after Calvin's notice. The Meridian confirmed that all unauthorized delivery requests were canceled. Unit 1807 sat empty, clean and quiet, waiting behind a door that finally answered to my name. 2 weeks later I visited the condo alone. Patrice met me in the lobby and handed me a newly activated keycard. It was plain black, the same kind Tessa had waved like a trophy. In my hand, it felt different. Not glamorous. Not triumphant. Heavy. I rode the elevator to the 18th floor without music, without guests, without anyone telling me how to feel. When I reached the door, the hallway was so quiet I could hear myself breathe. I tapped the keycard against the lock. Green. The soft click nearly undid me. I stepped inside and stood in an empty living room washed with afternoon light. The windows looked out over Charlotte, over streets I had driven, tired over buildings where I had worked through classes and heartbreak and birthdays nobody remembered properly. I thought of my 17-year-old self folding away a college sweatshirt she never got to wear. I walked to the window and opened Grandma Ruth's letter again. A door with your name on it should open for you first. I read the line until it settled somewhere deeper than anger. Then I sat on the floor because there was no furniture yet, and for the first time in years I cried without trying to explain the tears to anyone. They were not only sad tears, they were release. They were proof that my body finally believed the danger had passed. I did not move into the condo right away. That surprised people when they heard. They expected revenge to look like luxury furniture and balcony photos. But I had no desire to build a life out of proving Tessa wrong. I took my time. I met with Calvin. I learned the full structure of what Grandma Ruth had left. I made decisions slowly with advice, with documents, with my own signature at the bottom. Eventually I kept Unit 1807 and rented it to a visiting professor through a formal lease. The income helped me pay down loans I should never have needed. I also started a small education account in my grandmother's name for young women at the community college where I had rebuilt my life. It was not a grand foundation. It was not a headline. It was a quiet correction. Sometimes that is the only kind that lasts. My family tried reaching me through relatives for months. The messages changed flavor but not substance. First anger, then guilt, then nostalgia. My mother sent old photos of me and Tessa in matching Christmas pajamas. My father wrote that life was short. Tessa sent one email saying she hoped I was healed enough someday to understand the pressure they were under. None of them said the words that mattered. We took it. We lied. We were wrong. I did not answer. Silence had once been forced on me. Now it was chosen, and that made it powerful. I learned that no contact is not always a slammed door. Sometimes it is a locked one. Sometimes it is standing on the safe side of your own life and refusing to hand out spare keys to people who only visit to rearrange your walls. People like to say family is everything, but that is too easy. Family can be shelter, yes. It can also be the first place you learn to disappear. Blood does not make theft generous. Love does not make manipulation holy. A shared last name does not give anyone the right to spend your future and call your silence maturity. My parents used to say I was strong like that, explained why I deserved less. I know better now. Strength is not how much you can lose without complaining. Strength is the day you stop letting people rename your wounds as blessings. It is the moment you look at the people who raised you and understand that gratitude does not require surrender. Tessa was right about one thing. The condo did not make me happy by itself. A deed cannot heal a childhood. A keycard cannot refund years. A locked door cannot love you back, but it can tell the truth when everyone else has been paid, in comfort to lie. It can mark the place where your name stopped being negotiable. On the day her keycard stopped working, my sister thought the building had made a mistake. It had not. For once, the door knew exactly who I was.